Tonight, we're diving into the remarkable life and legacy of Qing Shi, one of the most powerful and successful pirates in history. Fierce, strategic, and virtually unstoppable, Qing Shi commanded a fleet that rivaled navies, enforced her own code of laws, and defied empires, reshaping the world of piracy in ways that still spark awe and admiration today. Before you get too cozy, take a second, if you haven't already, to like the video and subscribe to the channel. And don't forget to drop a comment letting us know where and when you're tuning in from. Now let's set sail on this incredible journey, and we hope it helps you learn while you sleep. The South China Sea lay quiet beneath a silver sky, broken only by the rhythmic slapping of waves against the hull of a weather-beaten junk boat. Gulls wheeled in the air, their cries swallowed by the wind. The scent of salt and storm clung to the horizon. It was 1801, a year that would whisper the beginning of a storm the world had never seen coming. At the center of this calm before chaos stood a woman known to few, feared by none, yet. Her name was Shi Yang. But she was not yet the pirate queen history would one day bow to. Not yet. At this moment, she was still a courtesan in the floating brothel known as the Red Lantern, moored just outside the bustling city of Guangzhou. The Red Lantern was infamous, not only for its luxuries but for the kind of information that spilled from the mouths of drunken men like wine from cracked cups. Shi Yang had mastered the art of listening. She had learned to smile without revealing her thoughts, to charm without surrender, to study power while pretending to worship it. And when powerful men talked, they often said more than they realized. Navy captains, merchants, smugglers, governors, they all came through the Red Lantern. And Shi Yang remembered every secret they spilled. She was beautiful, yes, but it was her mind that was truly dangerous. One humid night, as red paper lanterns flickered in the breeze and the sea hissed softly beneath the hull, a man stepped aboard who would alter her fate forever. His name was Jingyi, and he was no ordinary sailor. Jingyi was already a legend, a pirate lord commander of the fearsome Red Flag Fleet, a coalition of pirate ships that roamed the southern waters like hungry sharks. He was bold, cunning, and unlike the other men Shi Yang had met, he didn't underestimate her. As he stepped onto the deck, rain beginning to mist from the dark sky above, he saw her through the doorway, seated among silk cushions with her face half-turned to the storm. He later said it was like meeting the eye of a dragon hiding behind a smile. Their conversation lasted hours. They spoke of the sea, of power, of empire, of rebellion. She challenged him. He listened. She knew he wanted more than gold. He wanted legacy. He saw that she wanted something too. Freedom. Power. A world rewritten in her own image. Within days, he made her an offer that shocked everyone aboard the Red Lantern. Not a mistress. Not a concubine. A wife. And so, Shi Yang became Qing Shi, Madame Jin, wife to the pirate lord. But if anyone thought she would be a silent partner in his exploits, they did not understand who she was. Not yet. Qing Shi stepped aboard his flagship not as decoration, but as strategist, partner, and, soon, commander. Their union was not just of affection, but of ambition. Together, they began to shape the Red Flag Fleet into something more than a gang of raiders. Under their shared rule, discipline was enforced, alliances forged, and enemies crushed. Pirate captains bent the knee to them, some out of respect, others out of fear. But the seas were not easily tamed. Storm clouds gathered, not just in the sky, but among rival pirates, imperial navies, and foreign traders, all of whom saw the rise of this couple as a threat to the established order. And in the heart of it all, Qing Shi watched. Calculating. Waiting. The world still didn't know her name. But it would. The Red Flag Fleet moved like a shadow across the South China Sea. Its sails, dyed crimson, were like the wings of a great bird spreading across the horizon. Under the joint command of Jingyi and Qing Shi, it became a force unlike any the region had seen before. But greatness always comes at a cost. Qing Shi knew this better than anyone. She had risen from the ash of a life where she had been bought, sold, and expected to disappear. Now she stood on the deck of the lead ship, beside Jingyi, no longer a courtesan but a commander, silent, watchful, and absolutely in control. The sea, for all its wildness, respected those who learned how to bend its will. Under Qingxi's influence, the Red Flag fleet evolved. She didn't just push for more raids, she pushed for structure, organization, codes of conduct. She established strict laws aboard the ships. Any pirate caught stealing from the common plunder would be executed. Any attack on a civilian without direct order would result in beheading. Rape? Immediate death. Desertion? Death. Disobedience? Flogging, exile, or worse. The rules were brutal. But they brought order. Other pirate factions began to notice. Some resisted, seeing this couple's rise as a threat to their own influence. One by one, they tried to challenge them. One by one, they were defeated, or absorbed. Qingxi offered them a choice, kneel or burn. Most chose wisely. In just 2 years, the Red Flag fleet expanded to nearly 300 ships. Then 400. Then 600. It wasn't just a pirate gang anymore. It was a floating kingdom. And in this kingdom, Qingxi ruled beside Jingyi. But whispers were already circulating, whispers that she was the true mind behind their victories. That while Jingyi led with fire, she led with foresight. She handled negotiations with smugglers and foreign merchants. She manipulated rival factions like a chess master, turning enemies against each other without ever firing a shot. She spoke with diplomats, hired informants, and even paid bribes to Qing officials who could be persuaded to look the other way. She was building something bigger than just a fleet. She was building an empire at sea. But fate is fickle. In the autumn of 1807, during a typhoon off the coast of Vietnam, Jingyi died. Some said it was an accident, that his ship capsized in the storm and he was swallowed by the waves. Others whispered of betrayal, assassination, a power grab. But when the sea calmed, one thing was certain: the great pirate lord was gone. The fleet mourned. But it was Qingxi they looked to. All eyes were on her now, thousands of sailors, captains, mercenaries, and killers, waiting to see what the widow would do. Would she disappear into obscurity, return to land, or be swallowed by rivals eager to claim Jingyi's crown? She did none of those things. She stood on the deck of the flagship in her mourning robe, hair bound high, face calm as steel. And with a single command she made her move. She claimed leadership of the entire fleet. Not as a widow, not as a placeholder, but as pirate lord. Men laughed, at first. Then she named her second in command, Chung Put-sai, Jingyi's adopted son and rumored lover, who now swore loyalty to her. Together, they crushed the opposition before it could even rise. By the time the Red Flag sails appeared again on the sea, it was clear to all. A woman now ruled the South China Sea, and she had no intention of giving it back. The wind howled through the masts like a warning from the gods, but Qingxi stood unmoved. She had taken power in the aftermath of death and doubt, and now she would solidify it with iron law and ruthless clarity. The South China Sea was a war zone of ambition. Rivals lurked in every corner, petty pirate lords jealous of her fleet, foreign traders anxious about her reach, and the Qing dynasty itself, trembling behind palace walls. They all waited for her to slip, to show weakness, to fall. But Qingxi did not fall. She ruled. At its peak, her Red Flag fleet had over 70,000 pirates, men, women, and even children, spread across 1,800 ships. No pirate in history had ever commanded so many. Not Blackbeard. Not Bartholomew Roberts. No one. And yet, this vast floating empire did not descend into chaos or turn on itself. Why? Because Qingxi understood something many did not. Power requires discipline. She issued a pirate code, stricter than any naval order. It was law. And law aboard the fleet was life or death. Plunder had to be registered and divided evenly. A portion went to the collective fleet fund, and the rest was split among the crew, fairly, without favoritism. Stealing from the plunder? Death. Betray the fleet? Death. Strike a fellow pirate without cause? You'd lose an ear, or worse. But it wasn't just punishment that made the code effective. Qing Shi rewarded loyalty. Captains who followed the rules gained prestige, power, and favor. Common sailors could rise through the ranks if they proved themselves. And perhaps most revolutionary of all, she gave women a place in her empire. Many of her ships had female crew. Some served as spies. Others were fierce fighters. But there was no tolerance for abuse. If a man assaulted a female captive, he would be executed on the spot. If a woman willingly became a pirate's wife, and he betrayed her or was unfaithful, he faced death. This wasn't just about justice, it was strategy. Her rules made the fleet loyal to her, not just afraid of her. Qing Shi wasn't trying to rule through terror. She was building something stable, something lasting. And it worked. Under her command, the Red Flag Fleet didn't just raid ships. They controlled trade routes. They imposed taxes on merchants. They set up floating outposts along the coast. If you wanted safe passage through the South China Sea, you paid Qing Shi. Refuse? You didn't make it to your next port. The Qing dynasty grew desperate. They sent warships, patrols, whole battalions. Qing Shi's fleet outmaneuvered them all. Qing forces were either bribed, captured, or humiliated and sent home in pieces. Even the great naval powers of the West, the British and Portuguese, saw their ships burned, raided, or turned around. And through it all, Qing Shi remained untouchable. Calm, calculating, unbending. She commanded respect not just because of fear, but because of brilliance. She wasn't the strongest. She wasn't born into nobility. But she understood people, power, strategy. She was the eye of the storm. And the world was starting to realize. This was no ordinary pirate queen. This was a ruler of empires. In the winter of 1808, the waters of the South China Sea turned red again. But this time, it wasn't just because of pirates. It was because the world's most powerful navies had arrived, and they were coming for her. The Portuguese, emboldened by Qing pleas and backed by European interests, dispatched a fleet from Macau. Their goal was clear: crush the Red Flag Fleet, capture Qing Shi, and restore order to the sea. To them, she was more than a pirate. She was a disruption to global trade, a thorn in the heel of empire. But Qing Shi was ready. Her scouts had already reported on the fleet's movement days before it even entered her waters. She didn't just rely on firepower, she relied on intelligence, anticipation, and the sea itself. The first battle came near the Pearl River Delta. The Portuguese ships, tall and bristling with cannon, opened fire from a distance, confident in their range and European superiority. But their shots landed wide or splashed into the waves. Qing Shi's fleet, lower in the water and faster, maneuvered like a pack of wolves. Her sailors darted between islands and shoals, drawing the larger ships in, closer and closer. Then, without warning, the Red Flag Fleet struck. They came in waves, dozens of ships at a time, swarming their enemies from all sides. Grappling hooks flew. Fire arrows lit the sky. Pirates boarded with ropes clenched in their teeth and daggers in hand. The Portuguese flagship was seized in under an hour. Its captain? Captured. Its cargo? Claimed. Its pride? Gone. The message was clear: Qing Shi would not be defeated by Western steel and arrogance. But her war wasn't over. In the months that followed, the British Navy attempted to intervene. Backed by trade interests and colonial politics, they viewed her as a threat to the stability of the region. Yet again, they underestimated her. Rather than confront them head-on, Qing Shi played a different game. She shifted her fleet, used decoys, sent false intelligence through captured merchants. The British followed shadows and rumors, wasting time and resources. Her real fleet? It moved unchallenged, raiding supply lines, looting outposts, and slipping away before the British even knew what had happened. By the time they realized what she had done, they were too late. They'd spent months chasing ghosts. And the Qing dynasty? They were embarrassed. Their own navy had failed repeatedly. Their officers were either corrupt, incompetent, or terrified. Coastal villages were paying tribute to pirates, not the emperor. Tax collectors were disappearing at sea. Fishermen flew red banners just to avoid being mistaken for targets. It wasn't a rebellion. It was an occupation. And at the heart of it was Qing Shi, not just a pirate, but a ruler in all but name. She collected taxes. She enforced laws. She managed diplomacy, commerce, and punishment. She had her own economy, her own navy, her own chain of command. The world watched stunned. Never before had a pirate empire stood so tall, or lasted so long. But Qing Shi knew the tide would turn eventually. Empires have long memories, and even longer resources. She couldn't just win battles. She needed to win history. And to do that, she would have to play her most dangerous game yet. Peace. Victory can be as dangerous as defeat. By 1809, Qing Shi sat atop the most powerful pirate empire in recorded history. She had defeated the Portuguese, outwitted the British, humiliated the Qing navy, and ruled a fleet so vast that it darkened the horizon. But empires don't last forever, not even the ones born from blood and salt. The Qing dynasty, battered and embarrassed, wasn't giving up. Their forces, though weak and corrupt, were being reorganized. The emperor, no longer dismissing Qing Shi as a nuisance, began treating her as a full-blown threat to the stability of the realm. He authorized new alliances, including renewed naval cooperation with the Portuguese. Together, they launched coordinated attacks, stronger, faster, and smarter than before. And slowly, the tide began to shift. The red flag fleet still held power, but cracks were forming. Smaller factions began to grumble. Some captains, hungry for independence or reward, talked of breaking away. Others whispered of surrender. The sea that had once been her kingdom was turning on her. But Qing Shi, as always, thought 5 moves ahead. If she could no longer rule the sea by force, then she would rule it by negotiation. And so, she made her boldest move yet. She would seek amnesty. But not just for herself, for her entire fleet. It was a gamble that stunned her enemies. Why would the pirate queen, undefeated, suddenly seek peace? Because, as she saw it, peace was the final plunder. The one thing no pirate had ever stolen and lived to enjoy. But she wouldn't kneel. She wouldn't beg. She would negotiate, on her terms. The Qing court was skeptical. They assumed she was bluffing. A trick. A trap. But Qing Shi sent an envoy with clear demands. Full pardon for all pirates under her command. The right to keep their wealth. Land and status for key captains. Integration into imperial society, military positions, trade licenses, and security. In return, she would disband the most powerful pirate force in history, peacefully. The court hesitated. There was pride to consider. Honor. Appearances. But the emperor, wise enough to recognize victory when it wore the face of surrender, agreed to a meeting. Not with her envoy. With Qing Shi herself. And so, in a moment that history could hardly believe, the pirate queen stepped ashore. Dressed in silk robes, armed with nothing but her presence, she walked into the heart of enemy territory, not as a prisoner, but as a negotiator. By her side was Chung Patsai, her second in command and, by this time, her lover and future husband. They walked through the gates of the city not in chains, but with escort. And when the talks began, it was Qing Shi who spoke first. She laid out her terms calmly, clearly, as though she were settling a business deal rather than ending an era of blood and rebellion. She spoke not just as a pirate, but as a leader, as a tactician, as someone who had ruled more lives than most governors ever dreamed. In the end, the Qing dynasty agreed. And just like that, without a shot fired, without a ship sunk, Qing Shi won her greatest battle. She had taken everything the sea could offer. Now she was walking away with her life, her fleet, her fortune, and her freedom. The year was 1810, and the seas had fallen silent. The Red Flag Fleet, once a monstrous force of nearly 70,000, now dropped anchor for the last time, not in surrender, but in triumph. The pirate empire that had brought emperors and admirals to their knees was dissolving, peacefully. And at the center of it all stood Qing Shi, the woman who had orchestrated the most astonishing exit in pirate history. She had taken the unthinkable and made it real, a full imperial pardon. Legal recognition. Freedom. And perhaps most importantly, retirement. But she did not return to obscurity. Far from it. Qing Shi stepped into life on land with the same cunning she had ruled the sea. With her immense wealth intact, she settled in Guangzhou, one of China's great southern cities. She purchased property, invested in businesses, and navigated the world of politics and trade as easily as she once sailed through typhoons. Her marriage to Chung Pitsai was made official, legitimized by imperial recognition. No longer outlaw and second in command, they became husband and wife in the eyes of the state. And Chung Pitsai? He was given a military commission in the Qing Navy. The irony was delicious. Once hunted as one of the most dangerous pirates alive, he now hunted other pirates for the empire, using the very strategies Qing Shi had perfected. Together, they transitioned from fugitives to functionaries. And while others faded or fell into disgrace, Qing Shi thrived. She opened a gambling house, a legal business that catered to merchants, officials, and elite society. It was said her establishment ran more smoothly and fairly than any government office. And behind the scenes, she continued to pull strings, making deals, settling disputes, and collecting debts with the same authority she once held at sea. But she never flaunted her past. She didn't need to. Everyone knew. Children who once feared tales of the red flag sails now listened in awe at night, whispering stories of the pirate queen who'd beaten emperors and vanished without a trace. Her legend was growing, even as she quietly drank tea behind carved wooden screens in her city estate. As the years passed, she avoided the fate that claimed so many others. She was never assassinated, never arrested, never betrayed. And while other pirates of history were hanged or hunted, Qing Shi was honored, even respected, by the same empire she had once defied. When her husband, Chung Pitsai, passed away in 1822, she mourned quietly. There were no great speeches, no drama. Just a woman who had lived too many lives, watching the sea grow distant. But she didn't crumble. She never did. She simply continued. She raised their children, managed her business, and lived well into her 60s, an unthinkable age for a pirate of her time. No battles, no blood. Just peace. And when she died in 1844, she did what almost no pirate in history ever managed. She died in her bed. A free woman. A wealthy woman. A legend. But even in death, Qing Shi didn't belong only to history. She belonged to myth. To the whispers of the waves. To every tale of rebellion, ambition, and the unbreakable spirit of a woman who refused to bow. Legends don't vanish when their heroes die, they echo. And Qing Shi's legacy was not buried with her body in Guangzhou. It drifted quietly but powerfully through the bureaucratic halls of the Qing dynasty, across the whispers of trading ports, and into the pages of naval records. Because what Qing Shi did wasn't just remarkable, it was impossible by every standard of her time. She had built the most successful pirate empire in history, yes. But what mattered even more was how she had done it. With organization. With vision. And with a level of governance that rivaled, if not surpassed, the empire itself. After her surrender, Qing naval commanders found themselves in an uncomfortable position. They couldn't ignore the efficiency of the pirate empire. Qing Shi had managed what they had failed to do for decades: protect trade routes, enforce discipline on the seas, and create loyalty among a notoriously unruly population. So, in the years that followed, the Qing military quietly adapted. They revised naval codes, increased surveillance on merchant routes, formed better intelligence networks using some of the very tactics Qing Shi had mastered. Some former pirates, men and women who had once sailed under the red flag, were absorbed into the official navy as advisors, officers, even informants. Her former fleet members, once feared criminals, became a new maritime class, seasoned, dangerous, but loyal to the new system. Or at least loyal enough. In a strange twist of fate, Qing Shi had done more for China's coastal defense than any admiral in a generation. The bureaucracy, of course, would never openly credit her. To admit that a pirate, a woman no less, had improved their system would be political suicide. But her fingerprints were everywhere. Trade became safer. Smuggling became smarter. Piracy never disappeared, but it changed shape, became more covert, more splintered. The era of pirate kingdoms had ended with her. And still, the stories grew. In taverns, sailors spoke of a woman who tamed the sea. In markets, grandmothers told children tales of the red flag queen whose eyes could command 1,000 ships. Foreign diplomats, confused and curious, wrote reports about her that eventually made their way to Europe. British naval officers who once mocked the Chinese pirates now studied her battles at sea, trying to understand how she had outmaneuvered ships twice her size. Portuguese generals remembered the day she walked away with her fleet intact and their dignity in tatters. But even outside the military and political world, Qing Shi became something more than human. She became a symbol. To some, a ghost story, a pirate queen who vanished but might still return. To others, a hero, the embodiment of rebellion, of cleverness, of defiance against a world rigged against her. And to women? A legend. Proof that in a world run by kings and emperors, a woman from a floating brothel could take the reins of history and steer it where she pleased. And she didn't do it by pretending to be a man. She didn't disguise herself, or hide her past. She wore it, owned it, and won. For all her power, for all the ships and storms she commanded, Qing Shi almost disappeared from history. Not because her story wasn't extraordinary, everyone who heard it agreed it was, but because she didn't fit the narrative. You see, history, especially the kind written by empires, has a way of cleaning up its pages, editing out what doesn't fit. And a Chinese woman from a brothel who rose to become the most powerful pirate in the world? That didn't fit. The Qing dynasty never celebrated her. After all, to them, she had once been a criminal, a rebel. Her surrender might have been accepted, even honored quietly, but her rise was never supposed to be remembered. She was, officially, erased. And outside of China? The West didn't take her seriously either. European historians clung to their favorite swashbuckling stories, Blackbeard, and Bonnie, Calico Jack, names that echoed through English and Caribbean lore. The South China Sea was distant, unfamiliar, exoticized. And besides, who wanted to talk about a woman who'd won? For nearly a century after her death in 1844, Qing Shi faded into obscurity. Her legacy lived on only in scattered Chinese naval records, in whispered folklore, in stories passed down by coastal families who remembered the red flag sails like a fever dream. But legends, like embers, only need a little wind to ignite again. And in the 20th century, that wind came. Academics, digging through imperial archives, began to uncover references, notes, reports, and letters about a woman pirate whose empire had rivaled nations. Western historians, intrigued by mentions of a female commander in Qing naval documents, started to investigate. One name kept surfacing, Qing Shi. Sometimes spelled as Jingyi Sa, meaning wife of Jingyi. Sometimes listed only as the widow of Jing. But the deeper they looked, the clearer it became. This wasn't just a pirate. This was a phenomenon. By the 1970s and 80s, scholars began to piece together the full story. And slowly, Qing Shi began to rise again, not as a myth, but as a historical figure with undeniable influence. Then came pop culture. Filmmakers, novelists, comic book creators, all stumbled across the story and couldn't resist. She had it all: action, romance, rebellion, strategy. A woman who'd crushed fleets and walked away untouched. It was the stuff of cinema. Still, adaptations often missed the mark. They made her a side character, a villain, a ghost, a curiosity. But the truth was so much more powerful. It was only in the last few decades that Qingxi began to get her due, not just as a pirate, but as a ruler, a strategist, a revolutionary. Her name now appears in textbooks, documentaries, podcasts, and historical YouTube channels. Schools teach her story as an example of unexpected leadership. Women's history courses highlight her as a symbol of resilience and self-made power. And in digital culture, she's become something more, a meme. A TikTok legend. A symbol of boss energy, before the phrase ever existed. But even now, many don't know the full truth. That she didn't just break the mold, she shattered it. And she did it without a sword to her throat, or a noose around her neck. She did it by walking into the jaws of the empire and saying, "You'll give me what I want, or I'll take it anyway." A woman who was never supposed to rule became one of the greatest commanders in maritime history. A name that was nearly erased now echoes across bookshelves, screens, and classrooms. Qingxi didn't just survive history. She outlived it. In the 21st century, as stories of untold women rise to the surface, Qingxi's legacy has found a new home, not just in dusty archives, but in the hearts of those looking for stories of rebellion, resilience, and reinvention. She's been reimagined in novels and graphic novels, often depicted with storm-gray eyes, clad in silks that whisper like sails. She's appeared as a mysterious pirate queen in television dramas, her name passing across the lips of characters who barely know the truth. In a major film franchise, not named here for legal reasons, a character inspired by her appears as a stoic, silent pirate lord. It's only a sliver of her real story, but enough to spark curiosity. And that curiosity has grown. Search her name on social media, and you'll find threads, TikToks, reels, and documentaries calling her the original girl boss, the most successful pirate in history, or the queen who beat the Qing. People are hungry for her story, because Qingxi breaks every mold we're taught to expect. She wasn't born into royalty. She wasn't a warrior from youth. She wasn't even supposed to survive. She came from poverty, captivity, and sex work, a woman written off by society before she ever had a chance to speak. But she watched. She listened. She learned. And when the door cracked open, she tore it off the hinges. In a world that tried to bury her, she built a throne from the pieces. And what makes her story feel so powerful now isn't just the drama or the battles. It's the control. So many historical women are remembered as tragic, broken, or powerless. But Qingxi never played by those rules. She was not a victim. She was not someone's shadow. She commanded. When she chose to retire, she did it on her terms. When she chose peace, it wasn't surrender, it was strategy. When she died, it wasn't in chains, it was in luxury, surrounded by family and fortune. Her story teaches us something most textbooks overlook. That rebellion isn't always loud. That power doesn't always come from the sword. And that sometimes, the smartest leader is the one who doesn't burn the world down, but walks away with it in her hands. In classrooms, professors now use her as a case study in non-Western leadership and unconventional empire building. Business leaders analyze how she structured her fleet like a corporate machine. Feminists hold her up as a rare historical figure who refused to apologize for her ambition. And young people? They just see someone who broke every rule and didn't just survive. She won. The sea forgets many names. It swallows ships, empires, and men whole. It turns flags to rags and bones to dust. It washes away blood, memory, and ambition with the same indifference. But not hers. Qingxi's name clings to the tide like a ghost that won't let go. Not because she sailed the largest pirate fleet in history. Not because she outwitted navies, negotiated peace, and vanished on her own terms. No, her name survives because it challenges everything we think we know. She was not born into greatness. She seized it. She was not granted respect. She demanded it. She did not ride into history on the back of a man. She walked into the storm alone, and made it follow her. From the deck of a brothel ship to the helm of an empire at sea, Qingxi shattered every expectation that stood in her way. She lived at a time when women were silenced, when pirates were hunted, and when power belonged only to those born into it. And yet, she wrote her own legend. No crown. No throne. Just wind, blood, and iron will. Her fleet did not simply raid ports, it reshaped the region. Her laws brought order to chaos. Her surrender was a masterpiece of diplomacy. And when she walked away from it all, she left behind something far more powerful than treasure. A legacy. To this day, no pirate, not in Asia, not in Europe, not in legend, has ever matched what Qingxi accomplished. Not Blackbird. Not Drake. Not the fictional captains of fantasy tales and blockbuster films. Only she ruled the sea like a sovereign. And yet, her story isn't just about piracy. It's about possibility. It asks us, what can someone become when they refuse to be broken? What happens when the rules are rigged, and you write your own? And most of all, how far could we go, if we carried just a fraction of her fire? So now, as her sails vanish into the mists of time, one truth remains. Qingxi didn't just command the sea. She became part of it. A tide that never turned back. A wind that refused to be still. A name, whispered in waves and remembered in silence.